it is. Oh man, this shit is good. I'ma have to do this one for sure. Okay, but not right now. This one I just seen, avoid flirting and ego, and that sounds funny. So we gonna have to see what he talking about. Man, you see old boy looking creepy? Damn, the internet gonna do me like that, bruh? Come on now, dog. Spanning any bit. Okay, here we go. He looks like he's sitting in a wheelchair. I don't know why he's giving me that vibe.
The scripture that we are highlighting today is 1 Timothy 5:2, which instructs Christian men to treat older women as mothers, younger women as sisters, with all chasteness. Of course, the reverse is also true, that Christian women should treat older men as fathers and younger men as brothers with all chasteness.
Okay.
This is taken from the Watchtower article entitled We Can Remain Chaste, one portion of which discusses the matter of flirting with the opposite sex. My discussion is going to focus on keeping one's ego in check. Now, what are the connections between chasteness, flirting, and ego? Well, let's start with chasteness. That is purity in thought and action.
Ooh,
and it means being free from all taint of what is lewd or salacious. That is, what arouses or appeals to sexual desire or imagination.
What?
And what?
Damn. They don't want you thinking about nothing. And that's like in your mind. Like, who would know that? But they got you convinced so bad. Oh, man, this shit gonna be good. Okay, here we go.
To maintain our chastity is to avoid the practice of flirting. And what is that? Well, flirting means behaving amorously without serious intent. Such a person signals romantic interest with no intention of marriage. It may involve an inappropriate remark, a look, a touch, the tone of voice, a coy smile, even the way one dresses, stands, or carries oneself. Some single people flirt with each other or with married folks. Some married people flirt with single people or with other married people. And in this degenerate world, men flirt with men and women flirt with women. But it's inappropriate for single people to send romantic signals to each other just for amusement, and it is morally wrong for married people to direct that kind of attention to a person outside of their marriage. Interestingly, an attorney who practices family law reported, I talked to plenty of people who are going through divorce. In most cases, these marriages are ending because someone had an affair, and in all of those cases, the affair started out as just a little harmless flirting.
Okay, well, no shit. Like, that was obviously, my nigga, like, that was the dumbest, most obvious shit he could have pointed out. He needed a lawyer to tell him that. Anyway, the thing that they don't be fucking around with this shit, and it's like, because they're so strict on all of that, it kills the art of seduction and passion and just like having fun with it and building tension. Like, these niggas kill all that shit, and it's just like, you're a robot, she's a robot, everybody's a robot, so you're just going through the motions. Damn, yeah, that's real shit.
Of course, flirting is not harmless. To intentionally toy with the feelings of others is cruel. It can arouse wrong desires and expectations that may result in a lot of emotional pain. It can also lead to worse things, fornication or adultery. It's no wonder it has been said that flirts make poor friends and worse marriage mates.
I promise you, growing up in this organization is going to do way more trauma than some flirting would have. Believe me.
Well, in the world, flirting is viewed as a sport, and it's done to increase one's own self-esteem. Now, that's where ego comes into the picture.
Oh, and you
ego
know.
is the sense of one's own worth.
Yeah, and you know them witnesses ain't fucking with your self-worth. You ain't shit. You ain't shit. You can't take 2 steps. You need Jehovah. They do not want you to be independent. They want you to have to depend on the organization. So they gonna strip you of your personality, which they actually do, and tell you to put on a new personality so that you're not even the same person. Yeah, damn.
One source on the subject of flirting says it is a gigantic ego boost, an ego trip, because the flirt is doing something for his or her own gratification to make himself or herself feel better.
Hype me up.
But there's something the Apostle Paul wrote that can balance our thinking about this trait of self-esteem that imperfect humans tend to take to an extreme. So let's turn to Romans chapter 12 and verse 3
Here we go.
and see what Paul has to say.
They're going to use this
Romans
scripture
12 and verse 3.
to somehow apply it to
He wrote,
their agenda.
For through the undeserved kindness given to me, I tell everyone there among you not to think more of himself than it is necessary to think, but to think so as to have a sound mind, each one as God has given to him a measure of faith.
Damn.
Now, self-esteem is defined as confidence and satisfaction in oneself.
Okay.
And it can range from self-respect to self-conceit.
Nigga can't
Some
have
people have
self-esteem?
too little of it. Some people have too much of it.
Okay.
So Paul wrote, I tell everyone there among you. And what he tells us is how to avoid either extreme of thinking too much or too little of our worth in God's eyes. And Paul pinpointed exactly
Wouldn't we be worth everything in God's eyes? If we're going by their standards? This shit is so crazy.
where the problem lies. Because 3 times in the verse he used the phrase, to think. He wrote that a person is not to think more of himself than it is necessary to think, but to think so as to have a sound mind. So it matters how one thinks about himself or herself. Consider the person who has too little self.
And that statement right there, hold on. It matters how one thinks about himself or herself. That's everything. That's everything. The way you view yourself is everything. So if they can get in there and tell you how to view yourself, they have now got you. You're God. Your world is through your eyes, your brain, your vision, your imagination. That's how you view the world. If they can get in there and control that, they have got you. Oh shit, what the fuck?
Thinks about himself or herself. Consider the
Fuck
person
it,
who has
I'm
too
on
little
one.
self-esteem.
I said I'm
Paul
on
said
one.
it is necessary to think something of ourselves. It was never intended that modest, moral Christians develop an inferiority complex. Our dedicated relationship with Jehovah makes each of us precious and desirable to God, and we should really believe that. So the one with low self-esteem is not thinking enough of the right things about himself. And what Paul wrote 2 verses earlier in Romans chapter 12 can help. So let's look at verse 1 of Romans 12. Therefore I appeal to you by the compassions of God, brothers, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, a sacred service with your power of reason. Now, doesn't that describe what we are endeavoring to do?
Fuck no.
Haven't we dedicated our lives to Jehovah? Aren't we striving to live holy lives? Aren't we performing sacred service and making sacrifices for the sake of the kingdom?
Making
Certainly.
sacrifices for
And
the
all
sake
that
of
is
the
most
kingdom?
acceptable to our God. Our lives have real worth in Jehovah's eyes. So no one should have to resort to frivolous flirting to boost their ego.
What the fuck?
Now consider the person who has too much self-esteem. In his efforts to gain self-confidence, he has overshot the mark and has crossed the line between cultivating self-respect and arrogance. He's overestimated his own worth, thinks too highly of himself, and may behave in an unpleasant way toward others, as does the uncaring flirt.
Oh my God.
Well, Paul said something that applies here too at Romans 12, verse 16. Verse 16. Have the same attitude toward others as toward yourselves. Do not set your mind on lofty things, but be led along with the lowly things.
What? That's. Do not set your mind on lofty things, but be led along with the lowly things. Why would I want the lowly things for myself? Right? And it's like, religion teaches you to depend so much that it forces you to constantly be in a state of need. Right? So you constantly have to pray and to reach out. You're always giving thanks, and nothing is on you. Jehovah did everything for you. You were just the piece that he used. The lowly things? My nigga, there's no shortage of money. Go get that shit. They make luxury cars every fucking day. Go copy one. This teaches you to have a box, to have a ceiling over your head, to be limited. They don't want you to think that you can fly. They don't want you to think that your potential is unlimited, because then you can't be controlled.
Not set your mind on lofty things, but be led along with the lowly things. Do not become wise in your own eyes.
What?
So it's important that we have a healthy, balanced view of our own worth. And remember, it is the way of our thinking that Paul was cautioning us about, because that governs whether our self-esteem is in balance or not.
Oh my goodness.
No wonder that Paul said we ought to think so as to have a sound mind. That is, have thoughts that are based on a true premise about ourselves. Since it always helps to look at the example of Jesus, let's do that, in this case, by turning to Philippians chapter 2. Philippians 2, beginning with verse 5.
Hurry up.
It says, keep this mental attitude in you that was also in Christ Jesus, who, although he was existing in God's form, gave no consideration to a seizure, namely that he should be equal to God. Nobody emptied himself and took a slave's form and became human. More than that, when he came as a man, he humbled himself. Well, in every facet of his life, Jesus' sound mind kept his self-esteem in perfect balance.
That sounds crazy.
He never had too little or too much. He never thought more of himself than was necessary.
How do we know what Jesus thought? How would anybody know what Jesus thought about himself? I mean, that's...
We could never imagine Jesus trying to boost his ego by flirting with Mary and Martha, or with any other woman who was in his company.
Man, I bet Jesus was
Paul
pimping.
said, keep this mental attitude in you. Jesus' mental attitude. We should think the way Jesus thinks. Now note the context in which we find this admonition at Philippians chapter 2 by reading verses 3 and 4. Do nothing out of contentiousness or out of egotism. One Bible says, never act from motives of rivalry or personal vanity, but with humility consider others superior to you, as you look out not only for your own interests, but also for the interests of others. So we keep our egos in check. We stay clear of any speech, dress, or flirtatious actions that could be viewed as provocative, and we thus maintain our chasteness toward everyone.
Ooh-wee, that sounds like some straight-up control, manipulation tactics right there. So everybody that just watched that video in the organization, they're taking notes. They're writing the scriptures down that he's saying. They're going to go back home and study over this. Well, they're probably at the crib watching it or whatever. They're going to study it, right, and make sure, like, that's how deep they got you when you in there like that. Man, that shit is crazy.